Afternoon, and welcome back to Jeff and the Rabbi. By the way, Rabbi Freeman, welcome back. I know you've been just traveling all these darn vacations.
That's right.
Finally glad to get you back here.
Rested and tanned and,
Right.
ready to run.
Glad you made it back.
Yeah.
Glad you made it back. Now, today, I got to say this, and I've been kind of hinting at this for a lot of times with you, Rabbi Freeman, but I think it's just finally, I got to come out and say it. I think, Rabbi Freeman, you are just a square. Just a square. Let's just finally just come out and say it. And now even CNN agrees that you're just a square. We were talking about it, Rabbi Freeman and I, last night, that CNN has come out and say that monogamy is just not natural. It can't work. Monogamy doesn't work. You can't spend the rest of your life with one woman or one man. You just can't do it. And I'm sure what we're going to hear today from Rabbi Freeman, the square, is, oh, no, the Torah says this, and you got to do this, and you got to be married to one woman.
Right.
But no, it's just not right. And, and thinking about it, this is the 2010s now, and they might have a point here. All I'm going to say is, when we come down to it, we actually talked about this in past shows. We saw what was happening. With homosexual marriage, everything like that. I never thought that was really about homosexual marriage. It was about marriage is bad. The traditional marriage is bad. And I think we even predicted on this show that the next thing we'd be talking about is, well, if you can marry, if marriage isn't just between a man and a woman, why is it not between a man and three women, or a man in the Phi Delta Kappa sorority house? I mean, why not? You got to do what you want. What is it for you with all your rules that you keep bringing on to everybody and telling them what's right and what's wrong? I think the whole point here, and we now know that science is settled because we've heard it from the top.
It was reported on CNN.
And it was reported on CNN. The science is settled. You're a flat earther. You don't agree with it. You're just a barbarian.
Right.
You can do whatever the heck you want.
Right.
Now, what I've done is I've come up with a solution for you. I've come up with a solution to make you happy, and I figure you're going to like this. So that Rabbi Freeman doesn't seem so square and out of touch, here's what we're going to do. On the next shidduch that you're involved in, what you do, this way you can get the multi-wife people and the traditional guys all happy in one. One word, transgender. So what happens, in your next shidduch, you go for a transgender spouse. The first 3 days of the week, it's a traditional marriage. The rest of the week, he or she switches to the other gender.
Wow.
He's got multiple spouses. Everybody's happy. I got a good point?
I'll tell you the truth. It's actually, you bring up the transgender people. I read the CNN article like you did, and it says that monogamy is unnatural. And I mean, after all the animals don't do it. So, right? And I really felt bad for? The homosexuals. Here they are, running out in droves, getting married, and making vows to each other that they're going to spend the rest of their life together, like in these monogamous marriages, and battling all around the country to get the right to do that. And here CNN comes out and says, come on, you guys missed the boat. Monogamy is not natural.
Right. Wait up a bit. Keep me on.
Sheesh. Unless maybe they only meant like maybe male-female monogamy, but maybe heterosexual monogamy. Maybe they meant like homosexual monogamy is. I don't know. I've got to go back and reread the article.
You better have to read it again because I'm actually getting confused already. We just started the show.
Yeah, right.
I usually make mid-show before I get confused. So it's pretty bad.
Right.
So what's the answer? So I'm assuming that this is bad.
Well, I'll tell you what. There's two things to talk about here. The author of this particular article, I'm sure, was trying to say that people should not feel bad. What they're really trying to say is, and this is really what the bottom line of all this is, don't feel bad if you cheat on your spouse, because after all, that's the natural way to be, and you can't expect people to be unnatural. And all the proofs were lined up from the animal kingdom.
Okay.
Right. Which I guess, if all the proofs are from the natural animal kingdom, I guess we shouldn't feel bad if someone's eats their young,
Right.
I saw the guppies doing in my aquarium.
It does happen.
Or when you really get hungry, like if you see someone in the street, just attack them and eat them, because I saw a lot of animals, I guess, do that too.
Yeah.
Right. Or certainly eat smaller animals than you, smaller people. If you're really big, eat the small guy. Well. Anyway, all these proofs are kind of ridiculous, that the fact that, that's the way it is in the animal kingdom. Because the bottom line really is to try to remove the sense of guilt. That is the big thing all the time. Don't feel guilty if you're cheating or you're attracted to someone else, because that's really not the way it was supposed to be. We weren't supposed to be monogamous. So we got the Torah. The first thing that they'll all point out about the Torah, so I guess we should address that first and get this out of the way.
Right.
Polygamy. The Torah does permit polygamy.
Right.
Torah permits polygamy.
It happened in a couple good situations.
Right. Now, so one thing to clarify. The Torah does not permit female polygamy. A female clearly may not have multiple spouses at the same time. I mean, if you're divorced from one or one dies, you can have another one. Square. You got it. Even worse. Right. Even worse. If you're gonna allow polygamy, at least allow it in both directions.
Right.
But the Torah is like, is misogynistic because it doesn't allow the women to have multiple partners, but it allows the man to have multiple partners. Right. I would just say something about the Torah's attitude towards polygamy. The Torah, if you look at it, all of the stories in the Torah where you find polygamy, very interesting. They all seem to have at their root cause children.
Right. Okay.
Meaning somebody couldn't have children. And therefore they ended up with two wives.
Well, not all of them. There's one big example, even though that didn't work out too. The Jacob situation.
Jacob's story. Now that clearly, the way he ended up with all those wives is the story.
Right.
I mean, it's a story.
Right.
It's a whole thing. He wanted one. And as a matter of fact, even after he was married to the two, he still only loved the one, and that was a whole big issue because he really was.
So it didn't work out too well.
He wanted to be monogamous. I mean, that's the whole story of this tragedy, that he wanted to be monogamous and ended up getting tricked into being polygamous. So the one big episode in the Torah where you talk about polygamy, the tragedy of the story is the polygamy.
Right.
It's supposed to be monogamy.
That's why Rachel didn't have the kids, because Leah had the kids because Leah was unloved.
Right, but here he was in this polygamous relationship, and he didn't love the other wife, and that's the whole story there. Abraham was clearly monogamous until he's into his 80s, and only then his wife Sarah says, well, we got to have some kids, so she finds him a surrogate, and she brings him. Of course, changes
her mind after that. And
and then that doesn't work out, and as a matter of fact, that works out pretty disastrously. As the Jews, even till today, right? So that was a disaster. Isaac is monogamous. Okay, Jacob is polygamous, but the whole story, as I just said, is that it was like he didn't want it, and it ended up with him, and it worked horribly.
Not that fun, though. He's the one guy. He wasn't that fun.
Yeah. Okay, like you said, that's Isaac, he's just straight, like it.
Right.
Okay, anytime else you find in Torah, you find, for example, there was a man named Elkanah. He's the father of Samuel the prophet.
Right.
He had two wives. But it's clear he had two wives. One of them didn't have children, and one of them did. And he loved the one that didn't have children more than the one that did. Why? Again, it's clear that he was married to one, no kids. He had to take in the second one, and even so, he never really loved her all that much, although he had kids from her. And, but it was it was for children, which is an interesting thing. It shows you that marriage and children and procreating is like there you go. Even that.
Back off.
I'm just like, I'm looking into every mine in the minefield.
We cannot bring you into the 2010s. Yeah, you just keep going back.
Okay, we'll go this way.
It's not working.
We're blowing up in every which direction here.
Well, you do have one example, though. Solomon. He really didn't. He was.
So where you get into multiple wives is where you get into kings. Now, I guess we could say kings might be a little bit of a different story. And even so, the Torah says one of the few restrictions put on a king is don't let him have too many wives, because having a lot of wives is not healthy. Although the Torah permits it, but it's certainly not healthy. And Solomon and King David did not do well. If you look into the story, their multiple wives pretty much that was their Achilles heel in both of their stories. So I don't think the Torah, although permitting it, the Torah does not look at it as an ideal. That's number one. And number two, if we get into Talmudic times, like after the biblical era, although it's permitted, the scholars are downright negative about it. The name of co-wives, if a man's married to two women, the women are called antagonists. Soros. That is the name. The word antagonist means co-wife.
Wow.
There isn't a word for co-wife. The name for a co-wife is antagonist. Like you say, who are you? My name is Hannah. Okay, and who's that? Well, that's my antagonist, Sarah. Right? They were antagonists because they were perpetually antagonistic to each other. And as a matter of fact, every wife always felt that whatever the other one's getting is taken right out of me, right out of my pocket. If my husband's with her one night, that means he's not with me that night. I'm losing. Everything that she has is taken directly from me. That's their attitude. And it got so bad that in modern times, when you talk Jewish, modern means like within the last 1,000 years.
Yeah, makes sense.
So about 1,000 years ago, the Ashkenazic Jews in France, they just made a ban, no polygamy altogether.
Who was that guy? I remember
Right, his name was Rabbeinu Gershom, and Rabbeinu Gershom was like the chief rabbi in France at the time. This is like in 990 or something like that.
Right.
And he decreed, that's it, we're all done with polygamy. Although in the Sephardic countries, they continued to have polygamy, but it's not considered to be an ideal. And like I said, furthermore, women are not allowed to be polygamous whatsoever. So now really the question is, is it an ideal or is it not? Is it natural or is it not natural?
Right. Because that's the question they raised.
And all the proofs, of course, about natural and not natural were brought from the animal kingdom. The interesting question here is, and this shows a big dividing line, that we Torah Jews believe that what's natural for people and what's natural for animals have nothing to do with each other. We are not part of one system in that the rules that govern animals govern people. As a matter of fact, I think that if you look at the animal kingdom, you will find that most of them only mate to procreate.
I think that's pretty much true.
I mean, there are some that don't,
right,
but most of them primarily mate to procreate. I mean, the dogs don't mate with a female unless she's in heat.
It's true.
Right? So as soon as she's not in heat anymore, he's not interested.
That's a good point.
They just don't do that, So, and most animals are like that. They have a mating season, they mate, whatever it is, they're once a year, they're once whatever. They all have a mating season and they mate one time and they mate to procreate. Would you say, therefore, that that sex is exclusively for procreation? Whoa.
No.
Watch out there, folks. If you're looking at the animal kingdom, it seems as though the evidence shows that overwhelmingly sex is only for procreation. I bet you they're afraid to go down that road.
Right, yeah.
Right?
That's going off, right.
Even the Torah doesn't say that, but if you want to take the animal route, bottom line is, our DNA in the animals is like about 97% the same, but that last 3% is really makes a big difference.
I don't know. I did see Ken, our cameraman, chasing cars the other day, so I'm not really sure. So there might be some similarity there.
Yeah. So when we get down to it's that last 3%, the difference in that last 3% is the ability to do calculus, and compose poetry, and on and on. Right. So people are hugely different, and the norm for people. What is it? So what does the Torah want to get out of people? What does the Torah really want to achieve? People are supposed to try to elevate themselves, and the strongest tool that is at a human being's disposal in making themselves into a elevated being is the spouse and engaging in a monogamous relationship with that spouse. Now, first of all, I say spouse because it's so important, as you know. How would you ever have found out that you were wrong if you weren't married?
That's
right? You'd still be making all those mistakes.
Absolutely.
So thank God you got married. Right? Of course. But it is the idea of coming together with this other person and coming to understand them, coming to appreciate them, so on and so forth. When a person is engaged in multiple relationships, or not even relationships, but basically is just satisfying their desires with other people, then they're not really connecting to the other person. Half the time, they're just enjoying themselves. You have a feeling, you want satisfaction, physical satisfaction, I want physical satisfaction. We'll get together for a period of time. When we're done, we say goodbye. I got what I want out of it, you got what you want out of it. And by the way, what was your name? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that leaves me satisfied for a few minutes until I have a desire again. It's like a meal. I don't have a relationship with my food. I just eat it. And I eat it and I churn through it. So that type of relationship, that doesn't change me as a person. That doesn't elevate me. That doesn't do anything for me. The only way I'm ever going to engage in the person is by making a commitment to that person. And a commitment to be with that person, to identify with that person, to share my life with that person. And even more so, to make the highest level of commitment. You know what the highest level of commitment is?
What's that?
I'm only going to find my intimacy with that one person. That's a huge thing.
It sort of seems that Judaism, now that I look at it, is really into this relationship thing and also into this relationship thing with one other. I mean, it just seems like for Judaism, if you break it down, every part of Judaism, it's just about that one relationship, commitment, loyalty, and devotion, and to one other. Whether you're talking about God, or whether you're talking about your wife, or you're talking about everything else.
That's right. And from the other, I learned about God. There is a great line. The Torah talks about a woman who commits adultery and says that she trespassed. She trespassed against her husband. How did she trespass against her husband? I can see that the guy that she was with trespassed against him because he moved in on this husband's territory. This man and woman had made a commitment, and then the other guy from the outside came. How did she trespass? So she trespassed because she took her pleasure and the ability to find pleasure to somewhere else. And she was supposed to keep that together with her husband. Now, of course, you'll say, well, what happens if I can't find pleasure with my husband, so on and so forth? There is such a thing as divorce. There is such a thing as divorce, and then to people it's not working out, you get divorced, and you try again somewhere else. That the Torah understands that and recognizes that. But ultimately, when you're getting into it, you get into it with a sense of commitment to try to see if you and she can find a way to bond to each other in that special way and share something unique and special. And really, what the pity is? If there is no monogamy, there's no intimacy.
Well, that kind of makes sense.
And that is such a loss. Because if someone is sleeping around all over the place and they have all kinds of relations, and even when they're with this person, they realize full well that I'm going to get up from here and go to there tomorrow. And this person who I'm really sharing my body with and my intimacy with is really not really particularly intimate with me because they're going to be intimate with someone else tomorrow. That's not real intimacy. That isn't intimacy. Yes, that is maybe closeness for the moment, but that is not really sharing your full self. So what you lose, just like by this person that says that there is no monogamy, you know what you lose when you get rid of evil? You say nothing's really evil, right? Adultery is not evil. Nothing's evil. It's all natural. You know what you lose when you get rid of bad? You lose good.
You lose good. That makes sense. I
can
see that.
Good. You can get rid of monogamy. You lose intimacy. Intimacy is a precious thing, and in that world, they don't have it.
It makes sense. Well, there was one I've been reading about different kind of cultures that have one thing. The ancient Chinese had a great thing, and I like this concept. It was the concept of the tai-tai. And what the ancient Chinese would do is they would love the man would love his spouse, would love his woman. But once she reached a certain age, she's getting a little older, it was her job now she became the tai-tai, the mother, the head of the house, to go out and find a younger woman to bring back for the man. Now, no matter what, though, the tai-tai stayed the head of the house. So whatever he did, he had to go back to the bed and sleep in the bed with the tai-tai. Now the tai-tai gets a little old. I mean, the new one gets a little old. They get rid of that one in the middle and bring in another one. I tried to get this into my ketubah, but for some reason my wife wouldn't sign that when we tried to put that in there.
Probably also help with the procreation thing too.
Right.
You can keep having
kids.
Be
fruitful and multiply.
Right.
And still, the tai-tai, your original wife, is happy as can be. No?
Right.
Good? Bad?
Well, it's not the Jewish way.
Okay, just
right?
checking.
But it does recognize the fact that relationships, bonding between people is important.
So you explain this to my wife or no?
Yeah.
Not a good idea? No.
I didn't want to get involved in How many years have you been married?
73, I think now.
Yeah.
It seems like
Right.
I'm just kidding. I don't
Yeah.
remember, to be honest.
Yes, we're going on, probably between us, we're going on like at least a half a century of monogamy here.
Right, that's a lot of monogamy.
Right.
Okay, so we'll scratch the tie thing for now. But I understand clearly what you're saying. But again, in the new modern age, and this is the problem, and I think it started with, and I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. The reason people were for homosexual marriage was not because these poor homosexuals have been mistreated and we got to take care of them. They're against Torah marriage. And I think that's really what it is. If you want to break it down, they're against Torah marriage. They're against the fact that you, Rabbi Freeman, are saying this is the only way it can be. We should be free. We should be open. And why do we need to be intimate with one person? Can I be intimate with 7 people?
Right. Well, if you want to broaden it out, they're really against the word wrong.
Okay.
They don't like the word wrong. The problem with the word wrong is that sometimes I'm wrong. And I don't like to be wrong. It makes me feel guilty. It makes me feel bad. It makes me feel like, just filthy. And I don't like to feel like that. So therefore, we'll get rid of wrong. Huh? And like I said, if you get rid of wrong, you get rid of right. If you get rid of bad, you really get rid of good.
But imagine all the people living life in peace. I mean, doesn't that sound exactly? I mean, isn't that perfect, though? There's no wrong, there's no right, there's no good, there's no bad. We just are.
Living life in peace. And what really will happen in that world,
right.
There's no wrong and right and good and bad. Everyone will be killing each other.
Absolutely.
It'll be like mayhem in the streets, absolutely. It's going to be like, Saturnalia, Roman debauchery.
Right, I think you're right. I think that's the final outcome of pure nothing's wrong.
In Saturnalia, like this Roman festival, there was a week where you could really do anything. You could do anything to anyone, like it was just a total free-for-all. And everyone just loved that because it was just, great. I guess unless you happen to get beheaded or,
live it up.
Something like
Star
that.
Trek. There was a Star Trek about that, too. You have 1 week you can go out and do it. I think they got it from the Saturnalia.
I missed that episode.
No, but
how did it work out?
It didn't work out too well. It didn't work out too well. It didn't. I don't think anything. It's tough. You're gonna have a few dead people.
Right.
I get it, but we are supposed to be fruitful and multiply, though. So wouldn't it be easier to be fruitful and multiply? Our 12 tribes, obviously the 12 tribes.
So really, that's the bottom line there too, is that people are not interested anymore in being fruitful and multiplying. As a matter of fact, almost most of the energy is spent on trying not to multiply and not to be fruitful. That's the last thing I want to do is to be fruitful, and therefore, of course, once you strip that out of it. That's another part of non-responsibility, irresponsibility, because I want to enjoy myself in whatever way I want, and I don't want there to be any ramifications. Certainly if I create another person, then I've got all that responsibility. I have to take care of them, or somebody has to take care of them. Somebody has to feed them, and who wants all of that? And therefore, all of this stuff. And this is just really one big progression. But like I said before, someone should send this article to the homosexuals who want to get married. They're just buying in. The rest of the world is bailing out of marriage, and they're buying into it. Like, what a bad mistake.
I totally agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
One question, what is the halakhic status of a concubine? I mean, not in a different way, but having a concubine. Well, what's the whole deal with that? What would they say?
So, to tell you the truth, I've never met one.
Right.
Don't know one.
Actually is a concubine?
Don't even know anyone that ever has had a concubine. So here's a concubine in the concubinity, right? Yeah, and the way the concubine thing worked in the biblical times was that if a man let's talk about marriage. Marriage comes with certain guarantees. There's 2 primary facets with marriage. Number 1, the children of the marriage are the heirs. Children of marriage are heirs. And number 2, there are a whole list of, I guess you'd call it, protections or advantages that are offered to the woman who's in marriage. She is cared for and fed, she has a place and all that type of stuff. Now, if marriage is to be dissolved, there's really only two ways out of it: either death of the spouse or the get, a divorce, a bill of divorcement. Being a concubine is different. Being a concubine is man says to a woman, I'm going to have a relationship with you. We are in a relationship.
Okay.
We are, we're going together. Okay? From this, any children that come from this relationship will not be heirs to my estate.
Wow.
Not heirs. They're not going to get a slice of it. Okay? You don't get the same level of protections and advantages from my assets and all that. And this can be terminated at any moment by my announcement that it's terminated.
So it's similar to that Chinese thing. You get nothing.
Right.
The
You're
one
done.
in the middle. Yeah.
You're done. Like I decided today, we're done. We're done. Now, why would a woman want to do that? So, obviously women only wanted to do that when they couldn't find anything more stable.
That was just
they
last
want
resort.
Right. So I read an article some years ago, Harvard study, that said that women want a mate who is healthy, a provider, and can give them children. I forget exactly how the order went. But they showed that as the proportions of men and women in a society change and there are less men to be had, so women start to drop off, like what they're willing to, okay, so he's not healthy. Okay, so he can't provide, so he can, and ultimately can't give me children. And commitment, ultimately, one of them is they least want commitment. That was a Harvard study, don't tell the CNN people, but the women wanted commitment. And they found that at a certain point, they would, if they can't get full commitment, they'll start taking partial commitment, minimal commitment, and, and that's how it goes. And it was directly correlated to the proportion of males and females in the society.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's hope for every guy out there.
Yeah, I guess the polygamy thing probably is predicated on the fact that there were less males in the society to be found than females. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I got to say, all right, this is interesting stuff. So I'm not saying this takes you out of squaredom, but I like your answer. I like your answer, and I do think, in the truth of the matter, is that we keep going on this rate. The next conversation we're going to have is with the bestiality, because we're not going to be talking about just men and women and inanimate objects, robots. That's going to come up soon if we're still around for that conversation.
Right.
I think it's all one and the same conversation. It's just we are progressively going down a path which is just going to, as you say, definitely the end of intimacy, and then definitely the end of that relationship with one other, whether it be another human or God. I think it's all going to go down that path.
It really is very, the narcissistic society where it's really all about me. So, of course, all these relationships and relationship building and restraint for something greater and bigger and all that stuff just falls apart. And it's just self-indulgence. Someone marrying an animal, or someone not making a commitment to the person that they're married to. It's all just because it's about me, because I feel like I want to enjoy myself right now in this way, at this time, in this place. I don't really care about anyone else.
I don't need a long-term relationship with anyone.
Right. I got me. I have a long-term relationship with me and my therapist.
Right. That's the only guy who's going to benefit from this. Therapist. That's a good point. All right. Well, this is a very interesting episode. Pass it on to your friends, your polygamous friends.
Share the show with your friends, not your spouse.
Right, very good point.
Don't
share your spouse or the show with your spouse.
Don't share your spouse. Share the show.
Share the show.
There you go. Okay, I knew we could get that out of here.
That worked out.
Yeah.
All right, next week we'll be back with another great episode on Jeff and the Rabbi.